Today, we're going to explore how humanity built the rhythm of civilization using nothing but the raw forces of nature. We rarely think about time today because it's just handed to us on a glowing screen, but the journey to get here, man, it is an absolutely incredible story of human ingenuity. Let's get right into how ancient shadows measured time.
So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine waking up before the year 1300 AD. Your eyes open and it is pitch dark. Now, today you just grab your phone, squint at the screen, and instantly know, okay, it's 7:42 a.m. But strip away that glowing screen and something really wild happens. You're completely lost. You have absolutely no idea what time it is. And this wasn't just some hypothetical thought experiment. This was the literal everyday reality for every single human being alive before the 14th century.
So how did they do it? Let's dive into this. How did these massive, ancient empires run complex legal courts? How did they coordinate giant armies or organize strict temple rituals? Or, honestly, just wake up for work every single day without a single clock in sight? Well, they actually had to build the entire concept of a schedule out of the physical world right in front of them.
Section 1. Mastering the Shadows. Humanity's first clock.
You see, the very first clock humanity ever used wasn't built in some workshop. It cost absolutely nothing, and it hung right up there in the sky. It's all about the sheer observational genius of the ancient Egyptians, going way back to 3500 BCE. They noticed this really simple, profound truth. An upright stick planted in the dirt casts a shadow, and that shadow moves with absolute predictability. In the morning, it stretches way out to the west. Around noon, it shrinks down to almost nothing, and by evening, it stretches right back out to the east. They called this simple device a gnomon. And honestly, it is the great-grandfather of every single clock you've ever owned.
But, a stick in the dirt is pretty crude. So they upgraded it, and they upgraded it into a massive feat of monumental engineering. The Egyptians started carving these enormous stone obelisks. I'm talking towering structures over 100 feet tall, and they positioned them perfectly in public squares. The idea was that their giant shadows could be read by an entire city all at once. It was basically the world's very first public clock.
And this giant clock actually built the foundation of our modern day. Egyptian priests would literally mark the ground around these obelisks with stone lines. They divided the crawling shadow into exactly 10 equal parts for daylight, and then they added one twilight hour in the morning and one twilight hour in the evening. So the crazy takeaway here is that our modern 12-hour system, it wasn't born from some super precise math or mechanical gears. It was literally born from a shadow crawling across the sand.
But this brilliant system had one huge, totally unavoidable flaw. The sun eventually sets, right? And when it does, or even when just a heavy bank of clouds rolls in, the shadow clock completely fails. Your entire city's timepiece just vanishes into the dark.
Section 2. When shadows fail. Engineering new clocks.
To fix this dark reality of a world without shadows, ancient engineers realized they just couldn't rely on the sun anymore. So what happened at night? Well, the Egyptians just looked up. Night duty priests started tracking the stars. They identified 36 specific star groups, which they called decans. Now, because a new decan rises on the eastern horizon roughly every 40 minutes, a priest didn't need a physical clock at all. He just needed to watch the horizon. And you couldn't mess this up. Miss your star, and you'd wake up the wrong priest for the wrong ritual. In an ancient temple economy that was built entirely around the precise timing of offerings, yeah, that was a massive, unforgivable mistake.
But let's think about the limitations here for a second. Stars don't work indoors, and they're completely useless on cloudy nights. So, around 1400 BCE, an Egyptian inventor had a massive breakthrough. What if time could literally flow? They invented something called the clepsydra, which translates to water thief. Basically, you fill a stone vessel up to a marked line, let it drain from a tiny hole at the bottom, and as the water level drops past carved marks on the inside, an hour passes. It was genius. It worked perfectly even in a pitch-black room.
And this incredible tech spread like wildfire, eventually making its way to ancient Athens, where it was used to solve a highly relatable, very human problem: lawyers who talked way too much. Water clocks were actually used in court to limit how long a lawyer could speak. When your water ran out, boom, your turn was over. It actually gave us this hilarious Greek expression. If you were a windbag lawyer just dragging out your argument, people would literally accuse you of stealing water.
Now, what's really fascinating is how different cultures took this exact same idea and perfected it in wildly different ways.
While the Greeks were just timing legal arguments, Han Dynasty engineers over in China took the water clock to a completely different level. They built these complex, multi-tiered bronze vessels that dripped from one basin into the next. This setup ingeniously corrected the changes in water pressure as the top vessel emptied, giving them a perfectly constant drip rate. We're talking about a level of engineering precision that mechanical clocks wouldn't even match for another 1,300 years.
Meanwhile, Buddhist monks in China solved the indoor timekeeping problem using a completely different element: fire. They created the incense clock. They'd calibrate sticks or coils of incense to burn at a known, super steady rate. And the sequence they used is just so smart. They'd tie small metal balls to threads right over the incense. As it burned down, the fire would reach the thread, snap it, and the metal ball would drop into a bowl below with a sharp clink. So a monk deep in meditation didn't have to break focus or open his eyes to check a dial. He just sat in silence and listened for the sound of time falling.
Over in medieval Europe, they were using fire in a really similar way. They'd mark candles with horizontal lines to measure the hours as the wax melted away. But they also totally borrowed from the incense clock playbook. They started pushing tiny metal nails into the wax at specific intervals. When the flame reached the nail, the wax melted, and clatter, the nail dropped right into a metal tray. It was literally history's first alarm clock.
That leads us perfectly into Section 3, Hearing the Hour, Monks and the Medieval Bell. Here is a really fascinating shift. For over 1,000 years, most ordinary people didn't actually look at time at all. They didn't need to know the exact hour. They only needed to hear it. During the medieval period, monasteries operated on incredibly rigid schedules of prayer. Things like matins before dawn and vespers at dusk. A designated monk had to wake up and ring the bell for each one, often relying on nothing but raw discipline and a rough guess at the stars. And as towns naturally grew around these monasteries, the entire population basically surrendered their daily rhythm to that bell ringing out in the freezing dark. You didn't own time. You just heard it ringing over the rooftops, and you obeyed it.
And finally, Section 4, the mechanical shift. Gears replace nature. In the late 1200s, the game changed permanently. An unknown European inventor created a mechanism using a dropping weight, a gear train, and a brilliant little device called an escapement. This allowed the gears to release their energy in small, controlled ticking increments. For the very first time in all of human history, time didn't depend on the sun, or water pressure, or a burning candle. It depended strictly on gravity and gears. But here's the crazy part. When these massive, room-sized mechanical clocks were first installed in cathedral towers, they didn't even have faces, no hands to look at. They were simply machines designed to automatically ring a bell at the correct hour, finally replacing that freezing monk. In fact, the English word clock actually comes directly from the medieval Latin word cloca, which literally just translates to bell. Before a clock ever showed you a number, it spoke to you in sound.
When we look back at the timeline of all this, it perfectly captures the staggering evolutionary leaps humanity took. We started way back in 3500 BCE by capturing shadows on stone. By 1400 BCE, we were trapping time in dripping water. And finally, by the late 1200s AD, we managed to free time entirely from the unpredictable forces of nature, locking it instead into the precise rhythmic ticking of mechanical gears. So the next time you wake up and instantly glance at your phone, just take a second to remember what that number actually represents. Ancient people didn't have a clock in their pocket, but they still managed to build an entire civilization's rhythm out of sunlight, fire, and water. You were literally looking at the end result of 5,000 years of pure human genius. Knowing all the shadows, dripping bronze vessels, and freezing monks it took to finally put that number in your pocket, will you ever look at 7:42 a.m. the exact same way again?